Have you ever wondered why certain melodies will just stick in your mind while other melodies seem to just fade away very quickly? The secret lies in a concept that has shaped the very foundation of Western music, and this is called voice leading. From the intricate polyphony of the Renaissance to the structured composition of the classical era, composers have used the power of voice leading to create music that is emotionally beautiful and affects the audiences. In this video, we'll go on a journey through history to uncover the origins of this essential musical technique, and we will explore the scientific side of why humans seem to prefer these melodic lines. And now, up to the fascinating history of voice leading. Hello and welcome to Web Piano Academy. I'm Dr. Antonella Di Giulio. I'm a pianist and music theorist. If this is the very first video that you're watching on Web Piano Academy, you'll soon discover that I tend to blend music theory, music history, musical performance, and neuroscience. Especially because I am truly fascinated by how the brain works and processes information. In the end, it is all because of the brain. And so today we are starting a new series of 4 videos, and I will explore one of the most fascinating and fundamental aspects of music theory. In this first video, we will explore just the historical evolution of voice leading and counterpoint, tracing their roots from the early days of polyphony, or even before polyphony, to the Renaissance period, where the rules that still influence music today were first established. Many people don't fully understand what we mean by counterpoint or voice leading. I have a very good friend who is a very accomplished and very talented opera singer, and this friend once asked me for piano lessons, and I was surprised. He could clearly play the piano. He's an amazing musician, very talented, and I didn't understand what I could teach him. Later he clarified that he wanted to learn piano because he wanted to learn counterpoint and voice leading. And I asked him why. Apparently, some music theory professors in the university had told him that if he could play certain chord progressions in Bach pieces, then he would know counterpoint. So I'm not sure why a music theory professor in a university might have said that, but it's only partially true. Learning how to play a Bach piece or a Bach fugue, or any fugue for what matters, and learning the rules of counterpoint are 2 different things. It is like saying that you will become a pastry chef by simply baking a cake following a written recipe. And so you will learn to become a pastry chef for sure. Now, let's explore this counterpoint business then. To understand voice leading and counterpoint, we really need to go back in time to the beginnings of polyphony. In the medieval period, music was primarily monophonic. Mono, just one, and that means that music consisted of a single melodic line without harmonic support or with barely any harmonic support. However, as composers started experimenting with some variations of that, they started combining different melodic lines, giving birth to polyphony, many voices. In this early polyphony, known as organum, the voices often moved in parallel motion, particularly in perfect intervals such as fifths and octaves. This created a very strong and resonant sound, but it also meant that these voices were not truly independent. They were locked together in this parallel motion, and so there was no real variation. As music evolved, particularly in the late medieval and early Renaissance periods, composers really started to explore more complex interactions between voices, and the goal shifted from simply doubling voices at the fifth or at the octave to creating independent melodic lines that could interact in more sophisticated ways. This transition didn't happen overnight. Even in the late medieval period, during the Ars Nova, we see early attempts at creating more independent lines. However, it was during the Renaissance that certain rules were established. In the Renaissance, the independence of the voices became actually central to the development of what we now call counterpoint. Counterpoint means point against point, dot against dot. And it is the technique of writing multiple independent melodies that work together harmonically. This is where the concept of voice leading truly started to take shape. Voice leading basically refers to the way individual melodic lines or voices move from one note to the next, to the next, to the next in a piece of music. And so the goal of voice leading is to create some smooth, logical and pleasing transitions between chords while retaining some melodic integrity. This led to the development of certain rules that guided how voices should move from one note to the next, with a particular emphasis on avoiding now sequences of parallel fifths and octaves, which could undermine the independence of the voices. Now, imagine that in the medieval time, parallel fifths were expected, and now they are trying to avoid them because they want to be different. To teach these principles, Renaissance theorists developed a method known as SPs Counterpoint. Now, species are just levels, nothing else. This step-by-step approach to learning counterpoint was later formalized by Johann Joseph Fuchs in his book Gradus ad Parnassum, which remains a cornerstone of counterpoint instruction. Now, let's talk a little bit about this piece's counterpoint. The instruction is divided into 5 different species or levels, and each level adds a new layer of complexity. In the first species, we will have, for example, each note in one voice paired with a single note in another voice. In the second species, we will have 2 notes in one voice and 1 note in the second voice. This will introduce some dissonances or passing tones. As you can imagine by now, in the third species, 4 notes are set against 1, adding more rhythmic complexity. In the fourth species, syncopation and suspensions are introduced, increasing the interaction between voices. In the fifth species, a combination of all previous species is used, allowing something called free counterpoint. And so my friend, the opera singer, should have asked me to learn SPs Counterpoint. This method was not just a theoretical exercise. It was a practical tool that composers used to actually master the art of voice leading, ensuring that it was easy for them then to write music that was balanced, harmonious, and expressive. In SPs Counterpoint, one of the most important rules is that you should avoid parallel fifths. And this rule was not just about maintaining the independence of voices, but also about creating a rich polyphonic texture that will feel satisfying to the listeners. And so now let's look at the cognitive foundations of voice leading. What's fascinating is that the principles of voice leading aren't just about aesthetics. They are deeply rooted in our cognitive process. While composers were often following their musical intuition and establishing these rules, there is now some scientific research that explains why certain voice leading practices have become so ingrained in Western music. An article titled Tone and Voice, a derivation of the rules of voice leading from perceptual principles, written by David Uren and published in Music Perception in 2001, for instance, explored the cognitive underpinning of voice leading. In this article, David Uren outlines how traditional rules of voice leading, such as the avoidance of parallel fifths, are derived from basic perceptual principles. And so when two voices move in parallel fifths, they tend to fuse into one single auditory image for the brain, rather than being perceived as independent lines. This fusion reduces the polyphonic texture, making music less engaging and diminishing the clarity of the line. Uren's research highlights how our brain prefers smooth voice leading because it aligns with how we personally process and organize sound as human beings. When voices move independently yet closely in pitch and time, our auditory system is able to distinguish them as separate entities, creating a richer and more satisfying musical experience. This cognitive basis for voice leading explains why these rules feel so intuitive to both composers and listeners, and also to performers. And it also explains why deviating from them can have a noticeable impact on the listener's experience. And so I think it would be fascinating to explore further the role of counterpoint in voice leading and how these techniques were refined in the Baroque period. We will explore counterpoint in more detail in different videos, but for now, keep making music part of your life, and I will see you next. Bye!